Welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about the scope of a project management. Please understand this is where we need to validate the scope and the control process simultaneously so that our project is on track, and that is what we'll talk around it. So what is this scope validation, or did I use a word called control? Definitely yes. Scope validation, as in the objective achievement of objective, is the most important thing. And how do we achieve objective if we are keeping a proper track and control over it? So yes, the control process of monitoring the every stages of the project, the product scope, the managing changes, as in the process values, as in the quality issues. If there are anything, you need to keep a control, tight control into it, so that what we are looking into it, we are validating the achievement of the objectives, the project deliverables. Remember, project deliverables is not only objective but time based also. You need to achieve your objective as on the timeline basis, because why? The fund will be released accordingly. So control, it may take or may not include every stakeholders. From the customer's point of view, validation is including stakeholders from customer's point of view, as on when on basis, to have a very individual fact that the customer understand what is being handed over and how do they go about it, how will they monitor and track the process thereby. So that is all about validation. It's a mutual beneficial things. So under scope, the control part is preventing the scope from creep, from ensuring all the requesting changes. People at the beginning of the project, the validation, the control, the objectives, the scope are all will be mentioned. But despite that, people will put in certain requests for certain corrective or certain other issues or certain other objective that needs to be achieved. This needs to be prevented. To understand the total process in a nutshell, and that is what you need to understand. So understand those changes, the review, the control processes, because then only you will be able to control the budget. Validation is bringing the objective to the acceptance process, as in, at times what happens is you have project deliverables, but during the course of the project, the client might be looking for some kind of alterations. You need to understand those alterations will be incorporated, but it might impact not only on the effort but also on the time, not only on the time but also on the cost. Now this should be accepted by both the parties. So yes, bringing objectivity to the acceptance process and increasing the probability of the final product, probably the service, probably the object, to be accepted by either of the parties thereby. So quality control is process of monitoring, recording results of executing the quality management activities, and at each level that needs to be understood. To understand the project outputs are complete, to understand the project outputs are correct, to understand the project objectives are being achieved as being discussed, as was discussed. So validation of the scope will have process formalization, the acceptance of the complete project deliverables, as in what are the time basis you're looking into it. So quality control does not typically include every stakeholders from the customer's point of view, but probably major stakeholders, major customer points, major buyers, and then you need to fulfill their requirement. Validation wise, including stakeholders from customer side, authorizations, as in the sign off, as in the representation, as in the opinion leader, to understand what they are undergoing as a project deliverables and what they're taking over as in the process. So imagine you have a residential project, let's say a civil project, a residential project. The property developer would develop the project, right? Will construct everything. Let's say the landscaping, the building, the plumbing, the electricity, everything will be developed. But do you think that the project developers or the promoters or the civil engineers, will they be occupying the building? Probably not. It is the residents who will actually purchase this property, actually shift in their families along with their dreams, aspiration. They will take control over the thing. So this has been handed over. The project is completed and probably handed over to the building authorities, society, consortium, or probably a management is being hired by the building residents. So that needs to be understood, as in the signatures. Now, under quality control, verifies that project deliverables have been done, the work has been met as per the requirement of the stakeholders. Similarly, for validation of the scope, brings objective to the acceptance process, increase the probability of final product, service and result acceptance by validating every deliverables project thereby. So what are we looking as for the control, quality control things done for the scope validation and can result in the change request as in basis. Obviously, yes, this is what we are looking as for the scope thing also. So, emerging trends. Let us understand what are the real emerging trends of scope management. Scope management traditional approaches, let me count it first for you to understand. Then probably we'll move to the most emerging trends and the agile approaches thereby. That is what we are looking around it. So, project team attempts to identify and document the scope at the very beginning of the project. Before even starting the project, you need to document all the desired objective, all the processes, all the costs that will be incurred around it. Organization views scope changes after the requirement phase is complete as negative. Project managers rigidly control and probably even discourages changes after the stakeholders have signed. Why? Because it will encompass budget, monetary consideration. Why? Because it will elongate the time deliverables as the case might be. The cost of the change increases over time while the ability to make changes decreases. Projects when including scope as in bloat and as in this is the bloat time that we look into it, the extra time that we always ask before assuring the completion of the task thereby. That is what we are looking around it. Unnecessary product features include out of fear, out of mid project changes, out of any changes that the client would be asking around it. Then it might include cost. So this is what the traditional approach is. Traditional approach, everything has been documented at the very beginning. Process has been documented, scope been documented, money been documented, everything been documented. Anything deliverables in between, people desist, absolutely desist. They are only going to increase the time. And what we are looking into for increasing of the time? The project manager will actually do what? They will take extra time in their hand and probably a little bit of an extra budget because you cannot predict the future. You do not know what is it. It's a bloat time that has been taken. Now let us understand with the just in time, the agile technology, what we are looking around it. As on when on happens, the product owner gathers high level of requirements at the very beginning of the projects, breaking down further detailed requirements that have been going implemented to the immediate future. What are we looking into? We are breaking the project into different phases. We are breaking the phases into different stages and probably trying to document everything out there. That is what we are looking. Organization view change as a positive ways to improve product as a progress. So herein we are incorporating the viewpoints of the clients, the customers. Now, what are we making it? We are making it much more relevant, much more dynamic in nature. And with this, the cost would be impacting. Even the time would be impacting. But if it is on to our benefit, if we can control at least one, either of the cost or of the time of the delivery. So changes late in the project when you know about mostly about the project are most valuable changes. Change management is an inherent part of the agile process. You can definitely access the scope of the and the opportunity to include new requirement at every stage. The product owner determines the value, the priority of new requirement, adds those requirements to the product, thereby you fix your resources, you fix your schedule, the time delayed if you want to go around it. New features with high priority don't necessarily cause budget or schedule shape. Did I say at least the time or the cost needs to be managed? At least one of them has to be managed, and that's what the uniqueness of this agile approach is all about. It the project determines the scopes by considering which of the following measures to understand that you achieve the goals no matter what. You try to achieve goals just to satisfy every requirement of the client and the customer there about it. So we are trying to be inclusive in our nature thereby. Yeah, the validation scope, if we will look into it, what are we looking? See, this is what validation is all about. It is all about taking inspection or quality control every now and then, and thereby take appropriate decision. Please understand, what are we validating? We are taking inspection or in quality checks every now and then. If there are any anomalies found, we are trying to rectify it, or we are taking appropriate decisions accordingly. So inspection includes your project plan. You need to compare something with something, right? What has been actual and what was expected, the standards or the actual things, the project management plan, the project documents, the verifiable deliverables, and the work performance data. Data as in how many costs have been done, how many labor have been involved, how many objectives have been covered as such. Is the timeline being followed? What are we looking into it? We are talking about inputs, we are talking about outputs, we are talking about tools and techniques to measure and monitoring and control. Now this is what we are looking at for the inspection process. And what kind of decisions we're looking at? The accepted delivery. Are we on time? Are we with the quality? Is there any issues with the quality? The performance of the work information, the change request as in have, if required. Project documents update as we are talking around it. This is what validation scopes are all about it. This is the project management scope. So yes, the control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project, the product scope, managing changes and the scope baseline. It is called the monitoring and the control process. Now, this is what I have been trying to tell it to you. You have something called standards, as in management, project plan, the project documents, the work performance data, and the organizational process. Now, these are your standards that is going to be done. And what are your actuals? Where are you actually standing? Have you surpassed those standards, or you are still going to achieve those standards, if any? Now, this is what the control scope around it. You will like to take about the work performance information. You will like to understand what are the changes that is been incorporated or been requested for the project management plan, as in the updates are done, and the project documents to be updated as on when on basis. Now, we are talking the WBS. What are we? WBS. WBS nothing but work breakdown structures, everything. Now, what happened? Let me say about a project management update. Now, you have certain materials which will be consumed over a period of time. Let's say phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four. But then probably you have made a bulk purchase just because the cost or the prices were low around there, and it is skewing the phase one or phase two budget thereby. But believe me, those costs have been accumulated, and you will be saving in the next phases. Now, this is the project management plan that needs to be updated then and there. So this is what we are talking about. So validation scope is all about quality, and it is all that needs to be overlapped with one another. I just gave you an example in which one of the raw materials will be accumulated because the prices in the open market is low. Now you are accumulating, but those raw material will be consumed over a number of phases, which will be averaged out, and it will be beneficial for you as a project manager. And that is what we are looking into it. The primary focus of scope validation is acceptance by the customer, the deliverables, while quality control involves measuring correctness of the work. Control quality usually precedes validation scope process. This is what we need to understand. Stress the quality control. Yeah, remember, usually precedes the validation scope thereby. So let me understand what do we validate as far as the scope is concerned, or as far as the scope the project is concerned. First and foremost thing, the inputs and the outputs. What are my project management plans are all about it? What are my requirement documents? What has been documented? What has been mentioned in black and white? Requirement traceability matrix, the verified deliverables, as in by what timeline, what will be the cost, what are the phases that needs to be completed, what are the structures that needs to be finished off. And it need not be a civil project, it can be a scientific project also. Probably you're looking to develop a pharmaceutical molecule, let's say APIs, activated pharmaceutical ingredients. Now what are you looking into it? How do you go around? There are certain stages that you need to go around it. And after you develop a molecule also, you need to see their side effects on the patient. You need to have test stages. But what I'm trying to give it to the audiences is a complete gamut of a project. And project can vary from civil to a pharmaceutical to a scientific, and you name it, whatever it is all about it. Even the daily projects of having a school curriculum to be finished. Let's say this particular curriculum needs to be finished around it. Now, what are my tools and techniques to measure whether we are doing on the right time? It's the inspection of the decision-making matrix thereby. This been mentioned as a voting as by the expert level, as by the customer level, as by the project managers level. That need to understand. And this is where we will be talking about our outputs, as in the deliverables thereby. So control scope, the changes are inevitable in project environment, and hence we need to reduce the scope creep, the spillage. Creep is nothing but that spillage, that some kind of control change must be in place. trigger for scope could change from multiple sources, believe me, and it need not be only customer point of view. It can be a supplier saying, putting their hands up and saying we are not able to supply a particular material, and without that material, without that ingredient, without that raw material, you might not be able to proceed further. So there are triggers, you need to procure this thing, let's say from overseas market altogether. So it can be a multiple sources, and objective of this process is to ensure that no scope creep occurs in any of the projects. Approved change request can require updates in the PM plan, the project management plan, and in the document as the case might be. We are talking about the same techniques of the control scope. We are looking as to monitoring the projects, the scope, and incorporating the changes as with the scope baseline thereby. So yes, we are talking about the inputs as in scope baseline. The time might be deferred to a certain extent. Requirement document, multiple application or multiple licenses needs to be done from the regulatory authority. Required traceability matrix, the WPD or the work performance data as the cases might be. What are we looking out here? We are with the tools and techniques, the data analysis, what has been done and how it has been involved and how will it perform, what will be the performance level. That's the variance analysis, the trend analysis that needs to be taken around here. Then comes the output as the work performance information change request, update on the project management plan, project documents, and the lessons learned thereby, as every wall we got talk about it. Here comes the agile consideration, the new age technology which is taking the world by a storm, and it is talking about all startup, it is talking about all new age businesses. We are talking not only of information technology, any startup for that matter. It is an adaptive life process. Scope baseline would be replaced by product backlog. The backlog continues to evolve over the project life cycle. Adaptive life cycles are intended to respond to a high level of changes, frequent changes. Remember, it's a dynamic organization that we're talking about. The market is dynamic. Agile method deliberately spend less time trying to define and agreeing to the scope in a very early stage of the project. Spend more time establish the process for its ongoing discovery and refinement. During iteration planning, at the very beginning, the three processes, remember three processes: collect requirement, defining scope, and the work breakdown structure. This needs to be clearly jotted down in black and blue. You need to understand what have been repeated at each every criteria to predictive life cycle, where this would be one-time activity, the beginning of the scope. Validate scope process is a continuous activity in an agile contrary to the predictive life cycle, where this happens at the end of the project or the phases. Project runs in an agile technology using backlog as against the scope line. Remember, you have a master document. After that master document, that is for the initial project, and if there are any changes, you need to base upon the master document and probably elongate the timeline, elongate the budget, elongate the process thereby, and that needs to be understood then and thereby. Giving a just a problem statement for you to understand as far as the business is concerned. Brian, the project manager in a strong matrix organization, remember matrix organization, everybody is reporting to everyone, has been leading a project for his company for probably 10 years and more. The company has made a decision to streamline the operation and create policies, procedures to cultivate a culture that is more centric, customer centric. Remember, this shift in mindset has slowly been adapted by the company's leaders and the staff member. Brian, current project is only 1/4 complete, ahead of the schedule, and currently definitely within the budgets. Every 2 weeks, Brian schedules a meeting with key stakeholders and review the project metrics or the deliverables thereby. During the last stakeholder meeting, Brian was asked by one of the key stakeholders to add a little new features to the scope of the work with a formal request put in writing. The stakeholder has just returned from an industry conferences where he gained a very insightful insights to a certain advances in technology that would increase the company's competitive position and result in a large increase in the market share. How will you think that Brian would actually heed to the request? Now, business scenario, the solution is very simple. This is a formal request by the stakeholder. Brian should generally agree upon it, the change request process. This would include analyzing the cost, the benefits of the proposed schedule, and probably elongate it with in proportion to the changes that has been incorporated. Once this analysis is complete, Brian can present his finding to the sponsor and stakeholder for the decision. Ultimately, the ball comes to the stakeholders. Ultimately, the ball comes to the sponsor or the client to take an initiative or decision whether to go ahead with the changes or not. With this, I come to a completion of this particular presentation. Thank you for listening to me and hearing me out. Thank you very much.